Hi, I'm Jim Peacock with Peak Careers, and this is another interview that I have set up with Skip Niles, Dr. Spencer Niles. And normally I get to go out and enjoy his presence. His right, he's only about 10 miles as the crow flies from me right now, but we just could not make it work today. Uh,
Jim, is it my presence or is it the that presence?
oh man, Uh, you know, yeah.
And,
Well, that's
I understand. I take second fiddle to that lake every day.
Yeah, that is a you got a beautiful place out there, and I'll get out there as we
Sure,
talk.
we'll get you out here. We'll get you out here.
But normally we have done. I think this is might be our fourth interview that we've done, and we've done all three of the previous ones out there at the camp. But I was really this interview was really motivated by your speech at NCDA, and I told you, and I think it was the best keynote speech that I've heard in years. And
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
I mean, I was really there was a lot going on. And matter of fact, I actually because I'm on the board, I was lucky enough that I could get the online version, and I went back and listened to the whole thing all over again. I think it was titled "Well-Being, Mental Health, Career, and Importance of Change."
Yeah,
That's what I wrote, anyways. But
yeah, yeah.
it was really powerful, and that there were a number of there's a couple areas I really want to follow up on today in our interview. Um, for those of you who don't know Skip Niles, maybe you could give us a thumbnail bio. Skip?
Sure. Sure, yeah. So I am a professor of counseling at the College of William and Mary, where previously I served as dean for the School of Education. And before that, I was a professor at Penn State. And then before that, I was a professor at the University of Virginia. And before that, I don't know what I was doing. I can't remember. But, and like Jim, I've engaged with NCDA over the years and served as NCDA president a couple of times. I was on the board for about 25 years and edited CDQ and things like that. Um, so obviously, you and I, Jim, intersect not just uh, on the great state of Maine, but also
Mm.
in the area of career development and wanting to help people achieve their fullest potential and experience what some might refer to as peak careers.
There you go.
I don't know where I came up with that, but
Well, that's great. That's great, Skip. And there's a lot, and we'll put some more in your bio on the written on the YouTube channel and the webpage. But I really want to talk about this adaptable. You talked about adaptable, being adaptable in your keynote, and I can still remember it was just a few years ago. I read an article about it, the adaptability quotient and how important it is to be able to sort of change, and we think about Schlossberg talks about transitions and how to get through it.
Mhm.
You talked about super and how he looks at people in their development. But you also talked about Richard Rohr, and I think I read the From Wild Man to Wise Man, which is really
Yeah.
about male spirituality, which I thought was amazing. And then Eager to Love was the first one I read and it's about St. Francis. I mean, and I'm so impressed with that guy. Can you talk a little bit more about in your speech? You talked about order, disorder, and reorder that Richard Rohr was talking about. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that and the importance of adaptability?
Yeah. Let me say a little bit about the set the context relative to Richard. So, like you, that was the first book I read, Wild Man to Wise Man, and focused on male spirituality. And, it seems that many men, certainly true for me, especially these days, don't have male elders, that they can rely upon. And I know you were very close with your dad, Jim, uh, but I wasn't, unfortunately. Um, so Richard really was keenly sensitive to, and I think it emerged really out of his prison ministry. Richard was is a Franciscan priest. And gosh, I don't know how, a few decades ago, moved from his work, which was largely based in prison ministry in Cincinnati, to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and founded something they called the Center for Action and Contemplation.
Mm.
And he would say the most important word in the title of his center is the word "and,"
Mm.
right? Um, um, Action without contemplation can be reckless and and a bit haphazard and but contemplation without action uh, is just kind of navel gazing and really doesn't
Right.
amount to much. So you gotta have both. And so Richard had he's really not just a Franciscan priest. By the way, I got very involved in some of the work he was doing and did an internship at his center. And
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
yeah, and then I was on his board. I was on
Uh,
the board for the Center for Action and Contemplation. So really got to know Richard well and really respect and admire him.
yeah.
And he's much more than a Franciscan priest. He's also sort of a depth psychologist, very
Mm.
attuned to Jungian psychology in particular. He's a philosopher. He's a biblical scholar.
Yeah.
He's very ecumenical, and that ecumenism goes way beyond only Christianity. So as he says, if he were working in a parish, he would have probably been thrown out a long time ago. But he had a lot of latitude with his center, and he sells a lot of books. And so, and by the way, the revenue generated by his books all goes back to church. Richard lives in a very tiny home
Mm.
into it on a parking lot, right off a parking lot. It's like
Wow.
3 steps away from the actual church parking lot. His
Wow.
home is very, very tiny.
Yeah.
It's just a few rooms that he lives in.
And that's what I liked about, he's such a big thinker, and like you said, there's a lot of depth, but you can tell that it's a life of simplicity. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so
So,
so the order, disorder, reorder, what was that? Can you talk us through that little piece?
yeah, well, he really paid attention, and this is another thing he does very well. He pays attention to themes throughout history from psychology, spirituality, religion, and so forth, philosophy. And there's this thing like the Hegelian dialectic, this notion that things move from thesis to antithesis to synthesis. That there's this constant, you go one way, you go the other way, and then you kind of land somewhere where there's a new synthesis that takes into account, ideally, multiple perspectives. And Richard is big on non-dualism. He thinks that one of the issues that we have in the world these days is we're so dualistic, and that gets us into I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad, you
Mm.
know, your friend, your foe. It's like seeing, a lot of othering that we do in the world. And so he noted this natural sort of inclination in the universe to move from things are sort of a certain way, but then change happens. Change is always happening. Sometimes we're sensitive to it, sometimes we're not clued into it, but it's always going on, both within the universe, obviously, the environment, and also within us. And that's why I think that we're always, all of us, between knowing and not knowing. It's like, okay, you know, um, I'm happy with what I'm doing right now. I have no intention of changing, of doing something else. But be careful about that because, as Donald Super says, the self concept evolves over time, making choice and adjustment, continuous processes. We're always evolving. Not only that, the world of work is always evolving. Think pandemic. So that the world of work evolves, making choosing and adjusting continuous requirements. And we live at the intersection of those two, what I
Mm.
will call facts. we live at the intersection of those two facts. So we might not in this moment feel so much change happening around us or within us, but it is, but it is. And so that's where it's like you're here now in a certain particular place, and but you're having all these environmental interactions, and the environment is changing, and so that's influencing you sometimes in very small ways, sometimes in very dramatic ways. And so so as we kind of become more aware of the change, then we have the question of what are we going to do about it? And that's the importance of adaptability, which is, the capacity to change with change, the capacity to take in new information and to use it effectively to inform who it is we are becoming and what it is we are considering that we might do next. Then, as we know, it's always about what you might do next. It's never beyond that.
So
And so,
that's sort of the reordering of the disorder. Is that kind of where he's coming from there?
so it's so as the change emerges, you move from order to disorder. And you can
Mm,
think about any change process you've gone through where you didn't exactly know what you were going to do next.
right.
And there's a bit of chaos within that.
Hmm.
And so the work of Jim Bright and Robert Pryor makes sense here because that we experience, we live in that chaos quite a bit more than we might want to admit to ourselves. As Freud said, one of the biggest challenges is learning how to tolerate ambiguity, and so we
Yeah.
tend to try and ignore that, or not pay attention to what our environment has to teach us, what we are learning about ourselves and the world. And so we've got to work at staying open to that. And that I totally get that is not easy to do. I'm
Yeah.
a poor change agent when it comes to myself. I'm terrible at it. And
But I get worried about the people that they have a one system, one view, and they think this is going to work forever. And the real, and I think, you when you're dealing with people in the world of work, people change and jobs change, right? And we get new information all the time. There's always some new information that's coming in, right? AI is coming in, so we can use that information, and if you're a career service provider and you're not making those adjustments, you're going to be left behind, right?
yeah, absolutely. My gosh. I mean, in a way, I think that we are called to be kind of at the front edge of that change, or at least attuned to it.
Right.
Implications of that for not only for ourselves, but also for the people that we serve. And so, yeah, change is at the heart of the matter. And so we're constantly going through that process of things are a certain way now, but change is happening, which is moving us from order to disorder or a bit of chaos. We're not really sure what next, not really sure what next. And do I love the Penn State, they have this thing called the Division of Undergraduate Studies, or at least they did. I don't know if they do anymore, but they had this thing called the Division of Undergraduate Studies, and it was for all those students who are undecided about their major. And I thought, God, that ought to be like every student. I mean, consider how many students change how many students just claim a major so they don't have to like appear that they might not know what next, right? They kind of like, you worked in higher ed
Oh yeah. Yeah.
services. It's like, you know, uh, it's the rare student that starts in a particular major and ends in that same major happily. And so,
Yeah.
so there's this constant change process happening. And I don't know that we do such a great job in career services of helping our clients, our students, really learn how to lean into the change, how to be attuned to it, how to embrace it, how to cope with it, how to learn from it, so that you can move from order, disorder to reorder to something new, and understand that, that's a constant process. Just because you're in a new reorder doesn't mean that that's where you will be. You keep moving. Like, I'm only 70. So, I haven't been at this that long. So, but I can tell you so far, in those very short 70 years, um, man, constant change, constant change. And sometimes for me, I go into it fighting and screaming and trying to suppress it and repress it and ignore it. But anytime you do that, you do that to your, it's at your own peril, it's, and
Yeah.
so,
You know,
so
there was some research that was, and I can't recall who and what and when and all the details, but they were researching change, and they were asking people, or I asked all these people, how much change do you anticipate in the next 5 years? And they're like, oh, none, none. And then those same people went back, how much change happened in the last 5 years? And they're like, well, this changed and that changed and this, and the reality is, I mean, we all like the comfort of the predictability,
sure,
right?
sure, yeah.
And so this is a great segue into the next area I wanted to talk about, which is sort of that chaos. We
Mhm.
love the predictability, and we love the comfort of doing the same thing, right? I mean that the order, we want that order, but you gotta know that there's gonna be disorder and that it's gonna be different, right? And I like to talk about people's comfort zone and the panic zone,
Yeah,
what is in between is the stretch zone, right? And so the comfort zone is that order, right? That's where everything's going to stay the same. And there's really oftentimes not a lot of learning going on there. But
right.
if you're in the panic zone, there's not a lot of learning either because that is true chaos. But I like to talk about that stretch zone because that stretch zone is getting people to try new stuff,
Mhm.
and that's where the learning happens, right? And I just think there's a lot to be said about that. And in your speech, you talked about the fact that there's this like natural resistance to change and how we need to be bold. You talked about bold, and you gave some great examples. What kind of advice would you give career service providers to help those clients, you know, be a little bolder, right? Because action, right? It needs that. You need that right, as Richard Rohr talks about. But how do you help people be bold and get them over that, and nudge them into that stretch zone, what I call the stretch zone?
Well, first off, I really like that kind of those labels because they make, to me anyway, they make a lot of sense. And it's one of the things that Carl Jung talked about is the uh, impact of fear in everybody's
Hmm.
life. And so, and this is a paraphrase, but he says something about oh gosh, these I should have had it memorized, and I did have it memorized at one point, but now I don't. The It talks about the evil is the spirit of evil. Evil is the negation of uh, uh, the spirit uh, through the influence of fear, and that is to say that we allow fear to distract us from becoming that which we need to become.
Hmm.
David White says it better in some respects, I think. And that is that, it is one of his little poems, and that is that I look at everything growing so wild and faithfully beneath the sky, and I wonder why it is that we, you and me, look at everything growing so wild and faithfully beneath the sky, and I wonder why it is that we are that one terrible part of creation, privileged to refuse our flowering.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
and there's that notion of the saddest thing is a person that lived all their lives and never met themselves.
Well, man, no, that is isn't that the truth? That
Yeah.
is so sad. You know, you see people that they've never become anything, right?
Yeah. And you said it, only boldness can deliver us from fear. That's what Jung says. Only boldness can deliver us from fear.
Mm,
We have to act boldly, and that's scary. I think for everybody, it's like some people they they're so courageous and I'm not. No, I think it's boldness and moving out of what has been into what might be, not knowing what might be is frightening, a frightening place to go. But I think there are guidelines for how that can be navigated. Again, if we go back to Carl Jung, he talked about three things that are important for navigating change, and that is insight, understanding how you're changing, understanding what is changing, understanding the intersection of those two, and developing the insight, and then having the courage to acknowledge the change that's occurring and the implications of those change for who you might choose to become.
mm,
So it's insight, courage, the courage to act boldly and to move in the direction that you feel, if you want to go with the Vocari type thing, that you feel called toward. Another way to think about this stuff, which is, and again, is, we muck it up. We refuse our flowering in so many ways. This notion of, you can look at, we all have this compass within us. We all have this compass within us, but we allow that compass to, we don't pay attention to it enough.
hmm
It becomes sort of not so reliable. And the compass that we have within us is the notion of, I know when I resonate with something, that there's a sense of connection, there's a sense of wholeness, there's a sense of being at the right place, resonating with an activity, with a possibility. We know what that feels like. It usually has a very positive feel to
mm,
it. Usually with some excitement, some energy, right? Uh, and so there's resonance, and there's also dissonance.
hmm
When we experience that we're in the wrong place. My God, it's drudgery. Everything is. I don't feel anything being called alive within me in this place of dissonance. It's just not connecting. It's disconnecting from
Right.
who I am. And so, paying attention to those different parts of the compass, and then being bold and brave and insightful enough to move towards resonance, to use that as the environmental feedback that we can gather from paying attention to our experiences daily, and then keep taking small steps, moving towards things that we resonate with as much as that can be possible in our lives. And by the way, not just within work, but in all life roles that we play. And so insight, courage to move towards resonance, and then endurance.
Mm,
Insight, courage, and endurance are the three things that Jung talked about as being necessary for navigating change. Endurance means, like, um, I'm feeling pretty good today. I got it. Maybe tomorrow I might be a little not so sure again. Maybe the
right.
strength I felt yesterday isn't present today. And then maybe it's just easier to go back and not pay, just that capacity to persevere. And the cool thing within all those three, each one of those, insight, courage, and endurance, is that career practitioners have a role to play in each and every one of them,
Mm, mm,
helping people develop insight, greater
mm,
self-understanding, learning from environmental experiences. What's your environment teaching you about you? And then how do you use that? And then as you focus on using that, developing the courage to consider the possibilities and the support having the support necessary to be willing to consider those possibilities, and then helping clients persevere. Kind of, it's not a once and done process. It's a continual kind of building up and building up and helping people. And it's kind of like, when you taught your kid how to ride a bike and they had the training wheels on. Well, the career practitioners there with the training wheels and trying to help that kid get comfortable in riding the bike until they get to that certain point where you know that they got it, and you let them go. And they get so excited without the training wheels. They're pedaling, then they're moving, and they're actually riding the bike. And our job is to help our clients move from the place of being perhaps even afraid to get on the bike, to then getting on the bike with training wheels, to then riding the bike with no training wheels. And that's kind of what our job is. And we have an important role in each one of those steps.
I love the word being bold, because I think too often bold gets me to the stretch zone where people are like, oh, you got to have the courage to go do it. Well, for even doing informational interviews, that sometimes for some people that takes a lot of courage, right? But I think to be bold kind of is somewhere less than sort of jumping out of an airplane, right?
Yeah, right.
You gotta
Right.
be bold to just be bold. Have some of those that courage, and that's where Young talked about that courage. You got to have
Yeah.
the insight, but
Yeah.
be bold, but just have the courage to go out and try it, right? And then you need boldness to deal with the endurance too, right? I mean, you got to stay with it, because you got to be bold tomorrow, even if tomorrow's a bad day.
Yeah. 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 So much. So, yeah, I love what you're saying there. And the idea of part of our job is also, in terms of that boldness, how that gets operationalized, is helping clients to consider the type of bold action that might be in their stretch zone, but not impossible.
Right.
In their stretch zone, and with coaching and so forth and support, they can make that stretch and learn that they're going to live to tell about it, and then the next stretch, and then the next stretch. But part of it in terms of coaching, I think, is helping people understand what the developmentally appropriate stretch is for them to take on next.
Where are the training wheels, right? I mean, we're not just you're not going to just go to riding a motorcycle, right? We're going to get training wheels on a bike, and we're not going to do a unicycle. We're going to
Yeah,
do this, we're going to help those clients move at a pace that makes sense to them, right? That's
yeah,
bold enough where they have enough, we know there's enough courage to get them to that next level.
yeah, yeah. And that involves empathy, and a part of the coach, empathy and
Yeah.
understanding, and insight and experience, and getting some supervision and being able to work with somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, in
Yeah.
terms of how you might work with a particular client in this process. So there's a lot to it, obviously.
I want to wrap this up and talk about the activity that you raised. I love the consider your life as if it were a book. I was
Oh,
like, oh my God, this is like I just love this. And for
yeah.
those of you who know me, I just did a tech-free retreat on another lake right nearby you. This past Tuesday, I was on Messalonsky Lake.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So some friends of ours, their family own a camp out there, and Phil has been gracious enough to, when his parents aren't there, when they've gone back to Florida, he lets me use the camp, and it's the same view you have at your place. It's out on a beautiful lake. There's lots of trees, and it's gorgeous. And so this past Tuesday I was there, and one of the things that I played around with was writing my book, and so I started my chapters, and it was very fun. I
Good.
got, it's like I don't know if I've landed on my total book title, but I started the chapters,
Nice.
and chapter one was what I call right now I'm calling the lake and the family. When I was a very young kid, we lived on a Pleasant Lake in Michigan, and it was all about family, right? And then the early days, and then there was like the new me, and then mistakes. I have a chapter called Mistakes, um, and then I have a chapter called Walk in a Cemetery, which it was a huge night for me about making change. But I love this activity where I got to think back through my life and I came up with these little titles. But then your third, so you divide your book into chapters and give each a title. Number three, list something you learned. Oh my God, that was I love doing that.
Yeah.
What you begin to see these themes, right? And for me,
Right.
the importance of family and a Catholic foundation and making new friends and confidence, power of confidence, right? And those are just some notes that I made. Um, but I'm I couldn't get beyond the step four, identify the name of the chapter you have yet to live. And it was easy to go back, and it was very powerful going back.
Yeah.
But I love this where the next steps are identify the name of the chapter you have yet to live, three action steps to complete the chapter, and then write the dedication. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But what
Yeah.
advice do you have for people who are like me, who are stuck at this point where I'm like, what is my next chapter?
Yeah. It's what a great question, and what a beautiful place to be considering the possibilities. See, I intentionally stayed away from the word stuck because I don't think you're stuck. I think what you're doing is, first off, you're taking that activity very seriously, understanding that it's about your life and the story that you are constructing, and sometimes people talk about, well, I don't know if I'm so much constructing or that I'm constructing a life or life is constructing me. And so maybe it's the intersection of those things. But I think the one piece of advice is to really sit with that question for a while.
Mm,
Sit with it. You don't force the answer even, just consider it. Take the pressure off of I got to come up with something. I've got to, have a future chapter title that I can use and I can write down. Sit with it. Let it take its own pace and consider it when you're driving your car, when you're going for a walk, when
mm,
you're just kind of in the evening, just sort of relaxing, and give it a little time
mm.
and see what emerges within you. And I bet if you approach it that way, that something actually really will. Another, so there's that. Give honor the process and
Give it
allow
the
it
space, right? Give it that,
space.
you
Let
know,
it emerge within you, and you don't. You might if you're saying, okay, I've done that for a while, and still. Another strategy may be to say, you know what, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to come back to this one. I'm going to skip ahead to my dedication.
hmm,
Who do I dedicate my book, my life to? It can be a person, it can be people, it can be people you knew, it can be people you didn't know, but that influenced you substantially. It could be to a cause, it could be to a purpose, it could be all of the above. And and just maybe lean into that and see what emerges as a result of that. Because what that will really do, I think, when you do, I didn't used to do that part of the activity, but then I started, I think, because I've written enough books and had to write enough dedications, and I've dedicated books to my dogs and you know children and students and all that kind of thing. And so what it does is it really it just straight on connects you to what you really value and what's really been influential, what's really been important to you, and it probably opens up a space for gratitude, for possibility, for um, that notion of paying it forward. And so maybe again, if you've sat with that question, what's the future chapter that I've yet to live, but I feel as though I must live for my book or my life to be complete. And and you've sat with that for a while. Maybe skip ahead to the dedication, see what that stimulates within you, if anything.
You know,
And
and I think I have not sat with it enough. I agree with you. And I think, you and I are both um I think disciples of giving space to our lives. I think it's why I do a tech-free retreat. I turn the phone off, I turn the computer off. I go out to the camp. There's no Wi-Fi. I go and write, I go and sit, I go and think, and I go and I meditate. I mean, I was out there till 4:30, in the afternoon. I was there the whole day. And it's kind of like, well, you're at a camp very similar where you have this space, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
but too many people, not everybody has a chance to do what you and I are talking about here, but yes, they do. I'm going to argue, yes, they do. It may not look like a whole 8-hour tech-free day. It may not look like a whole summer out at Great Pond, but people have got to find the space for deeper thinking, right? And I think that's what I'm hearing you talk about.
It's so, geez, you've heard me say that Thomas Merton quote that busyness is an offense to the soul.
Yeah.
That,
Oh, I wrote that down. Yeah.
yeah, it's just that, and that's that notion that we stay so busy, we get so distracted that we miss it, the Greek word for soul is psyche, so that we become disconnected really with ourself. In fact, psychopathology is really that, being disconnected from your psyche.
Yeah.
And it's sort of soul sickness. And so I think unless we are intentional, this world does not support what you just described, that disconnect, that slow it down. We focus so much on doing that we minimize and discount the importance of being, human being and human doing. We're really good with the doing, not
Yeah.
so good on the human being side of things. My brother-in-law was just here, just left this morning, and he comes up every summer, and yeah, last night he was saying, "Aren't you ever going to get a TV in this place?" I said, "Nope, never."
I love it.
Never. And when my kids would come up here, I thought, oh, how's this going to be? No TV, all that. They couldn't have gotten along better when they were
Yeah.
little kids, they're in their 30s now, but when they're coming up here, 3 years old and 7 years old, they they leaned into it too. They would read, they would,
Well, I think we use those as crutches. We use those. We use social media. We use TV as crutches to not deal with this time, not deal with this space, not deal with this, the thinking and the creativity that your kids had to do, right? They had to be more creative. And the same, it's so true. I mean, we got to give ourselves that space.
Hey, I know you want to wrap it up. Can I do a quick poem from
Please,
John
I would
Donahue?
love it. I would love it.
This is one of my, I'm a big, as you know, I'm a big uh, John O'Donohue fan.
Yeah.
The Irish philosopher, poet, former priest, all that kind of thing. No longer with us, sadly, but he has such wisdom. He died in his 50s in his sleep, and but he left such a legacy of wisdom in his poetry. And this one poem is called "For a New Beginning." Kind of relates to this notion of what we've been talking about, Jim, and being able to become sensitive and attuned to changes that are emerging. And this is for a new beginning in out of way places of the heart where your thoughts never think to wander, and out of way places of the heart where your thoughts never think to wander. This beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety, and the gray promises its sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, then the delight really within your soul, then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again in energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, that transition between order and reorder and that disorder, though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm. For your soul senses the world that awaits you.
Mm, wow. I love that.
Yeah, it's just kind of, when I think about changes I've made, I thought, yeah, there was that stirring with, it's like I knew something was off. I
Right.
I knew something was coming. I didn't know what it was. And it was both frightening and exciting. And then it became more exciting than frightening. And then I was
And
willing
he
to,
talks about the courage, but I love that unfurl yourself. So it's kind of like you sort of have to give it the space to sort of happen, right? You got to recognize it, but you got to give yourself that space and then go, I'm gonna have the courage to move forward. I'm gonna unfurl, right?
yeah, yeah,
And move
yeah.
forward.
And Ram Dass talked about, when it is all said and done, we're all just walking each other home. Yeah. And that's really what we're doing at the end of it all. We're just walking each other home.
Hmm.
And if you think about our role in that process of helping others unfurl in the way that we're talking about, uh, dang, career coaches have an important role to play in walking alongside people to help them have the courage to be, as Paul Tillich said, the courage to be who they are becoming,
Yeah.
who they're meant to become.
Skip, I could keep going. I really want to. I'm trying to honor my clients, my people that like to try to keep it a half an hour, and we're a little over, which is I'm totally fine with.
I got another 2 hours, Jim.
I
Let's
know we do. I do too. I want to do another 2 hours, and maybe when you're heading home, you're heading back right now, tomorrow, but when you come back, we might do a follow-up. I
That'd be
just
great.
really,
I'm here.
I love this topic. Your keynote was again one of the best I've heard in a long time, and it was packed with lots of very thoughtful, a number of thoughtful items, and I think people really just needed to hear it. There were a lot of people. It resonated really well with a lot of people.
Well, I'll just say that all things I'm trying to work through myself. So we're all in this together. And so
Yeah,
thanks for
yeah,
this opportunity, Jim, and for the great service that Peak Careers provides to people as they try to navigate their careers and
yeah.
enjoy their own fullness of life, their own peak career.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, thank you. This is Peak Careers. I started with me teaching the facilitating career development class. Peak Careers also offers online seminars, a number of different topics taught by a number of different people. I teach 4 or 5 of them, and I have other people that teach topics that they're gifted in as well. I do workshops and I also have a weekly career email that goes out on Tuesdays. So anybody that wants to sign up can go to I'll have my website in the notes below. And I just want to say thank you, Skip, so much for
Hey,
the
brother.
time. I really appreciate it. I always love talking with you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
You too. Thanks, Jim.